I met Evan at Sarah's backyard barbecue 7 years ago, and I knew immediately he was different from the usual guys I dated. He was 34 to my 28, established in his career, owned his own place, and had this calm confidence that drew me in, while other guys were still figuring out their lives. Evan had his together. He wore a crisp button-down, even to a casual barbecue. And when he talked about his work in consulting, I could see the financial stability written all over him. We clicked right away, talking for hours about travel and goals and what we wanted out of life. When the topic of kids came up, I was completely honest with him. Pregnancy will ruin my body, and I've worked too hard for it. I told him, gesturing to my carefully maintained figure. Most guys would have gotten weird about that, but Evan just nodded and said he wasn't particularly interested in children either. Finally, a man who understood that some women have bigger priorities than playing house with screaming babies. The early days were perfect. Evan was attentive without being clingy, successful without being arrogant, and he seemed to genuinely appreciate having a woman who knew what she wanted. I loved how he'd defer to my opinions on restaurants, vacation spots, even which movies to watch. It felt like he truly valued my input, unlike those controlling jerks I'd dated before who always had to have everything their way. We moved in together after a year, and I immediately set about making his bachelor pad into a real home. The man had been living like a college student, with mismatched furniture and nothing but beer and takeout containers in his refrigerator. I introduced proper organization systems, coordinated the decor, and established some basic standards for how things should be done. Dish towels folded in thirds, then in half. Plates in the dishwasher all facing the same direction. Toiletries arranged by height on the bathroom counter. Simple stuff that makes a house feel like a home instead of some frat house disaster zone. Evan proposed after 2 years of dating, and our wedding was everything I dreamed of. Not huge, but elegant and tasteful, with gorgeous flowers and a photographer who captured every perfect moment. The first 2 years of marriage were honestly fine. We fell into comfortable routines, took nice vacations, and I felt satisfied with the life we were building together. Evan traveled for work sometimes, but that just gave me space to maintain our home the way I liked it and spend time with my friends. But somewhere in year 3, things started to shift. The physical affection just kind of died out, which honestly wasn't entirely surprising. Evan had gotten comfortable, maybe too comfortable. He'd come home from his business trips and just want to zone out in front of the TV instead of actually connecting with me. I'd put effort into looking nice for his return, maybe cook something special, and he'd barely notice because he was already mentally checked out, probably thinking about whatever boring project was waiting for him at the office. I started spending more time with my girlfriends, especially Jessica and Amanda, who had both gotten divorced in the past couple years. They were living their best lives, taking girls' trips and dating exciting guys and actually enjoying themselves, instead of being tied down to men who took them for granted. Even Sarah, who was still married, complained constantly about her husband who worked late every night and forgot their anniversary 2 years running. "You're still young, Brittany," Jessica would tell me over drinks. "Don't waste your 20s being some boring housewife while Evan gets to travel and have adventures for work." And she had a point. Here I was, approaching 30, spending my weekends organizing closets and meal planning while my husband got to see new cities and meet interesting people for his job. Where was my adventure? Where was my excitement? That's when I started noticing Marcus. He was a friend of Amanda's, recently divorced himself, and everything Evan wasn't. Marcus was spontaneous and funny, and actually paid attention when I talked. He'd text me good morning every single day and ask how my meetings went, and remember little details about my life that Evan couldn't be bothered to retain. When I mentioned that I hated cilantro, Marcus actually remembered it the next time we all went out to eat. When's the last time Evan had noticed anything about my preferences that wasn't written on the kitchen calendar? The flirtation with Marcus started innocently enough, just friendly conversations that gradually became more personal. He'd compliment my outfits and ask about my day and make me feel like someone actually cared about my thoughts and feelings. It was refreshing to talk to a man who didn't just grunt responses while scrolling through his phone. Meanwhile, things with Evan kept getting worse. We'd argue about money, about his travel schedule, about my social media posts that he thought were too attention-seeking. Please. Like posting a few nice photos of myself was some kind of crime. He'd gotten boring and predictable, coming home from trips and wanting nothing more than to watch his documentaries about World War II, while I sat there feeling like my life was slipping away. That's when I decided we needed to shake things up. The girls had been talking about a Vegas trip for months, and I thought it would be perfect. Some time away, some excitement, a chance to remember what it felt like to have fun instead of just existing in this mundane routine we'd fallen into. I brought it up to Evan on a Tuesday night while he was, predictably, watching another boring documentary. The girls and I are planning a trip to Vegas. I told him, just a long weekend? Nothing crazy. He didn't even look up from the TV. When? Next month. Jessica's already booked her flight. That got his attention. He muted the TV and turned to me with that serious expression he got when he was about to be difficult. I don't think that's a good idea. Excuse me. Vegas isn't really a girls' trip destination. Brittany is designed for people to make bad decisions. I could not believe what I was hearing. Are you seriously trying to tell me I can't go on vacation with my friends? I'm saying I'm not comfortable with it. The patronizing tone in his voice made my blood boil. Here was my husband, who got to travel wherever he wanted for work, telling me I couldn't take one trip with my girlfriends. The hypocrisy was unreal. Let me make this simple for you. Evan, I said, standing up so he'd know I was serious. Either you let me go on a girls' trip to Las Vegas, or you're in the doghouse for weeks with no sex. I expected him to back down, like he usually did when I put my foot down. Instead, he just looked at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before. Fine, he said. I'll take the doghouse. You're not going... I was so shocked I could barely respond. In 5 years together, Evan had never directly refused me anything. He was conflict avoidant to his core, always finding ways to compromise or just give in to keep the peace. But apparently Vegas was his line in the sand. Are you kidding me right now? I demanded. Nope. He turned the sound back on his stupid documentary like the conversation was over. Well, if that's how he wanted to play it, fine. I wasn't some 1950s housewife who needed her husband's permission to live her life. If Evan wanted to be controlling and unreasonable, he could deal with the consequences. I started spending more time with Marcus after that. What had been casual flirtation became something deeper, more intense. He understood what I was going through with Evan, having dealt with his own controlling ex-wife. We'd meet for coffee and talk for hours about our situations. And gradually those conversations became more intimate. The first time we kissed was after one of those long coffee dates, and I felt more alive than I had in years. Marcus made me remember what it was like to be desired, to be appreciated, to be with someone who actually wanted to spend time with me, instead of just tolerating my presence. You deserve so much better than this. Marcus told me one afternoon as we sat in his car after another amazing encounter. You're incredible. Brittany, any man would be lucky to have you. He was right. I did deserve better. I deserved someone who noticed when I got my hair done, who remembered my favorite restaurant, who made me feel like a priority instead of an afterthought. Marcus saw me in ways Evan had stopped seeing me years ago. The affair continued for months, and honestly, it saved my sanity. Having something to look forward to, someone who was excited to see me, made dealing with Evan's boring routine bearable. Marcus and I would text throughout the day. Little messages like thinking about you and last time was amazing that made me feel beautiful and wanted. When Marcus mentioned he had a business conference in Vegas the same weekend, the girls were planning to be there. It felt like fate. Maybe this was the universe's way of giving me the adventure I'd been craving. I started making plans with Jessica and Amanda, telling them about the coincidence of Marcus being there at the same time. This is perfect, Amanda said. You can finally have some real fun instead of sitting home with Mr. Excitement watching his war documentaries. I knew I was taking a risk, but what was I supposed to do? Stay married to someone who clearly didn't appreciate me while missing out on a chance at real happiness. I wasn't getting any younger, and life was too short to waste it being miserable, just to maintain some facade of a perfect marriage. I started researching hotels and making arrangements, texting with Marcus about meeting up while we were both in town. The excitement of planning something just for me, something that had nothing to do with Evan's boring preferences or predictable schedule, made me feel alive again. But then everything went wrong. I was getting out of the shower one morning when I noticed Evan acting strange. He was sitting on the edge of our bed with this weird expression, and when I asked if everything was okay, he just said he was fine and went to make coffee. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. For the next week, Evan was different, still polite, still going through the motions of our daily routine. But there was this distance that hadn't been there before. He'd watch me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, and a couple times I caught him checking his phone with this serious expression. I started to worry that maybe he suspected something, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Evan wasn't the type to snoop or investigate. He was too passive, too conflict avoidant to actually confront me even if he did suspect something. I was wrong. I was at work the following Tuesday, getting ready for my presentation to the Morrison account, when the receptionist called my extension. Brittany, there's someone here to see you. I walked out to the lobby expecting a client or maybe a delivery, and instead found a man in a cheap suit holding a manila envelope. Brittany Chen, yes. You've been served? The words hit me like a physical blow. I could feel every person in the lobby staring as he handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing there with divorce papers in my hands like some kind of deadbeat who wouldn't pay child support. My face was burning with humiliation as I walked back to my office, trying to ignore the whispers and stares from my coworkers. Jennifer from accounting was practically craning her neck to get a better look at the drama unfolding in our normally quiet office. I called Evan immediately, my hand shaking as I dialed his number. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded as soon as he picked up. I was crying and yelling at the same time, not caring who could hear me through my office walls. "How could you blindside me like this? At my job? Evan, really? You've been planning your own little blindside in Vegas," he said in this calm, cold voice I'd never heard from him before. "We could have talked about this. We could have gone to counseling. I told her it was too late the minute you booked a hotel in Vegas with another man." The line went dead. He'd actually hung up on me. I tried calling back, but he wouldn't answer. I left voicemails, sent texts, but got nothing in response. It was like he'd become a completely different person overnight. This cold stranger who could serve his wife divorce papers at her workplace and then refuse to even discuss it. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Evan had apparently been planning this for longer than I'd realized, because he already had a lawyer and had already started the process of separating our finances. He moved out while I was at work one day, taking only his personal belongings and leaving me rattling around in our house alone. Marcus, meanwhile, had completely disappeared. The man who'd been texting me daily for months suddenly went radio silent right when I needed support most. I tried calling him, texting him, even reached out through Amanda, but he'd apparently decided that a woman going through a messy divorce wasn't worth the drama. So much for all those promises about how I deserve better and how lucky any man would be to have me. The second things got complicated, Marcus vanished like he'd never existed, leaving me to deal with lawyers and moving boxes and the whispers at work all by myself. The divorce proceedings were humiliating. Evan's lawyer had printouts of text messages, evidence of the affair, documentation of everything I thought was private. I tried to explain to my lawyer that Evan had been neglecting our marriage for years, that I'd felt lonely and unappreciated, but apparently none of that mattered when there was proof of infidelity. Evan sat through the entire process looking like he was conducting a business meeting, calm and detached and completely unmoved by my tears or attempts to explain my side of the story. When I tried to catch his eye, to remind him of the good times we'd had together, he just looked through me like I wasn't even there. We split the house and the savings, which Evan's lawyer called equitable distribution, but felt more like being punished for having feelings and needs that my husband had ignored. Evan seemed to view the whole settlement as just paying me to get out of his life, which was probably exactly how he saw it. After the divorce was finalized, I kept hoping Evan would come to his senses and realize what he'd thrown away. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5. That had to count for something. People make mistakes, and marriages are supposed to survive rough patches. That's what for better or worse means. I started reaching out to him, just casual texts at first. "Hope you're doing well," or "saw something that reminded me of you." I wasn't trying to be pushy, just keeping the lines of communication open so he'd know I was willing to work things out when he was ready to be reasonable. But Evan didn't respond to any of my messages, so I had to find other ways to check on him. I'd drive by his new apartment sometimes, just to make sure he was okay. He was living in this sad little complex across town, so different from the beautiful home we'd shared. It made me think he was probably regretting his hasty decision to throw away our marriage over one mistake. I also kept an eye on his social media, though he'd made most of his accounts private after the divorce. Still, mutual friends would post pictures sometimes, and I could see glimpses of what he was up to. He looked tired in most of the photos, probably because he was realizing how much I'd done to take care of him and our home. A few months after the divorce, I heard through Jessica that Evan was dating someone named Megan. I was devastated, but also determined to show him what he was missing. I started going to places I knew he might be, just hoping for a chance encounter where I could remind him of our connection. I found them at Murphy's Bar on a Thursday night, sitting at a corner table looking cozy and comfortable. Megan was pretty in a basic sort of way, but nothing special. Certainly not the kind of woman who could build a real life with someone like Evan. I walked over to their table, trying to keep my voice casual and friendly. "Evan, what a surprise seeing you here." He looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read, while Megan just looked confused. "Hello, Brittany. I was just meeting some friends for drinks." I lied, gesturing vaguely toward the bar. "How are you?" "You look good." "I'm fine." "Brittany. This is Megan." "Megan. This is my ex-wife." "Brittany." The way he said ex-wife stung. Like our entire relationship could be reduced to those 2 words. Megan gave me a polite smile, but I could see the discomfort in her eyes. Well, I should get back to my friends, I said, though I made no move to leave. It's so good to see you. Evan, maybe we could grab coffee sometime and catch up properly? I don't think that's a good idea. Megan was looking between us with growing alarm, clearly sensing the tension even if she didn't understand the full situation. After a few more minutes of awkward conversation, she excused herself to the bathroom. She seems nice. I told Evan once we were alone. Very young. Brittany, what are you doing here? I told you. I'm meeting friends. No, you're not. You're here because you somehow found out I'd be here. The accusation hurt, even though it was basically true. I'm not stalking you. If that's what you're implying, this is a public place. Evan, I have every right to be here. But Megan must have decided she didn't want to deal with the drama, because she came back from the bathroom with her purse and coat, making some excuse about an early morning meeting. Evan left with her, barely saying goodbye to me. I felt terrible about ruining his date, but also vindicated. If Megan couldn't handle a simple conversation with his ex-wife, she clearly wasn't strong enough for someone like Evan anyway. He needed a woman who could handle complexity, not some fragile girl who ran at the first sign of real life. The encounters continued over the next several months. I'd run into Evan at the grocery store, at the gas station, at restaurants around town. Each time I hoped we could have a real conversation, maybe start to rebuild some kind of friendship that could eventually become something more. But Evan seemed determined to keep me at arm's length, always polite but distant, never willing to engage in the kind of meaningful dialogue that could help us work through our problems. It was frustrating and heartbreaking, watching him waste energy on casual dating when we could have been rebuilding something real and lasting. The situation came to a head during one of my more creative attempts to reconnect. I'd been having some chest pains and decided to go to the emergency room to get them checked out. While I was there, it occurred to me that this might be the perfect opportunity to reach out to Evan. A health scare tends to put things in perspective, and I thought maybe hearing that I was in the hospital would remind him that life is too short to hold grudges. I had Jessica call him from my phone, explaining that I was in the ER and asking if he could come. To his credit, Evan did show up, though he looked more annoyed than concerned when he walked into my room. "What's wrong?" he asked, standing near the door like he was ready to bolt. "They're running some tests on my heart," I said, trying to look as vulnerable as possible in my hospital gown. I was scared. "Evan, when something like this happens, you realize who really matters to you?" He stayed for maybe 10 minutes, just long enough to confirm that I wasn't actually dying, then made some excuse about having plans and left. The whole interaction felt cold and perfunctory, nothing like the caring man I'd married. The final straw came at Thanksgiving. I knew Evan would be at his parents' house for dinner, and I thought maybe seeing me in a family setting would remind him of all the holidays we'd shared together, all the traditions we'd built over our 7 years together. I showed up around dessert time with a bottle of wine and my brightest smile, acting like it was perfectly natural for me to be there. Evan's parents were polite, but clearly uncomfortable, and Evan himself looked like he wanted to disappear. "Brittany," his mother said carefully, "we weren't expecting you." "I know. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced. I just wanted to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. We may not be married anymore, but you'll always feel like family to me." The whole room went quiet, everyone exchanging glances like they were trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Evan's father offered me a piece of pie, probably just trying to fill the awkward silence. But Evan stood up abruptly. "Brittany, can I talk to you outside?" We went out to the front porch, and I could see he was struggling to control his temper. "You can't keep doing this," he said quietly. "Doing what?" "Caring about people who used to matter to me, showing up places uninvited, following me around town, calling me from the hospital for non-emergencies. I wasn't following you. Evan, I was visiting people I care about." "Stop. Just stop." He ran his hands through his hair, looking exhausted. "I need you to leave me alone." "Brittany, completely alone." "We were married for 5 years, I said, my voice breaking. "That has to mean something." It did mean something, but it's over now, and you need to accept that. He went back inside, leaving me standing on the porch alone. I could hear muffled conversations through the door, probably his family discussing what to do about me. The humiliation was overwhelming. I drove home in tears, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Everything I'd tried had failed. Every attempt to reconnect, every effort to remind Evan of what we'd shared, had only pushed him further away. But I couldn't give up. Not yet. The absolute final encounter happened 4 months ago at the grocery store. I was shopping with my work friend Lisa when I spotted Evan in the produce section, looking at avocados like it was some kind of scientific experiment. He'd never been good at grocery shopping when we were married. That had always been my job. I told Lisa I'd be right back and walked over to him, my heart pounding with nervous energy. You're never going to pick a good one that way, I said, trying for a light, teasing tone. You have to check the stem end. Remember? He looked up with an expression of pure exhaustion, like seeing me was the last thing he could handle that day. Hello. Brittany. Hi. How are you? You look good. He didn't. Actually, he looked tired and older, with new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when we were together. I'm fine. How are you? We made small talk for a few minutes, discussing nothing important, while I tried to work up the courage to say what I really wanted to say. Finally, as he started to move away, I couldn't hold back anymore. You know, it's not too late for us, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I know we both made mistakes, but people work through these things all the time. We could try counseling, or just start slow with coffee or dinner. I miss you. Evan, I miss us. He stopped walking and turned back to me, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd finally gotten through to him. But when he spoke, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. It was too late the minute you booked a hotel in Vegas with another man. The finality in his voice hit me like a slap. Lisa had wandered over during our conversation, probably curious about who I was talking to, and now she was witnessing my complete humiliation in the middle of the grocery store. Evan, please, I need you to stop. Brittany, stop showing up places I go. Stop trying to contact me. Stop involving other people. It's over, and it's been over for a long time. He walked away, leaving me standing there with Lisa staring at me like I was some kind of stalker, which I guess, from the outside, it might have looked like that was 4 months ago, and I haven't seen or heard from Evan since. According to mutual friends, he's been completely drama-free since then, apparently living his boring little life in his sad little apartment. Probably still watching those documentaries about World War II and folding his dish towels wrong. Meanwhile, I'm the one dealing with the aftermath of everything that happened. I lost most of our mutual friends in the divorce. My dating life is non-existent, and I'm living in a rental that's half the size of the beautiful home we shared. Marcus never did resurface, proving that he was exactly the kind of shallow person who disappears the minute things get complicated. Sometimes I wonder if Evan ever thinks about me, if he ever misses the life we built together, or regrets throwing it all away over one mistake. But knowing him, he's probably convinced himself that he's better off alone than dealing with a woman who actually has needs and feelings. I've thought about reaching out again, maybe sending a letter, or asking one of his friends to talk to him, but I know it wouldn't work. Evan has always been stubborn, once he makes up his mind about something, and apparently he's decided that our 7 years together mean less than a few months of poor judgment on my part. So here I am, starting over at 33, trying to rebuild a life that got destroyed, because my husband couldn't handle the fact that I'm human, and I made some mistakes when I was feeling neglected and unappreciated. Everyone acts like I'm some kind of monster for having an affair, but nobody wants to talk about the months of loneliness and boredom that led up to it, or the way Evan checked out of our marriage long before I checked out emotionally. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I'm not going to pretend I'm the only one who made mistakes in our relationship. Marriage is supposed to be about forgiveness and working through problems together, not running to lawyers the minute things get difficult. But apparently Evan never got that memo, and now we're both alone, dealing with the consequences of his inability to fight for what we had, instead of just giving up and walking away. Maybe someday he'll realize what he lost. Maybe someday he'll understand that throwing away a marriage over a few months of poor judgment wasn't worth the years of loneliness that followed. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll stay in his sad little apartment forever, watching his boring documentaries and convincing himself that being alone is better than being with someone who actually challenged him to be better. Either way, I'm done waiting for him to come to his senses. I'm done putting my life on hold for someone who clearly doesn't appreciate what he had when he had it. It's time to move on, even if moving on means accepting that some people would rather be right than be happy, and some people would rather be alone than do the hard work of saving something worth saving.